going to take up arms and come and attack them. That's what they want.
Right.
We got to realize that's exactly what they want. So we don't want to do that. We want to sit very quietly and meditate right now.
That's exactly right.
And I'm afraid that they're so good at what they do, and we let our reptilian minds control us instead of letting the forebrain control us, which is really the divine brain. And we need to let that brain control us. And that's the brain that's awakened when the Kundalini wraps itself around the spine and goes up and ignites the light body, which is the secret of alchemy, the secret of our destiny. And it's really my favorite subject. The aliens and all of that is just kind of mundane when you get into the extra-temporal realms of samadhi and Kundalini awakening and alchemy, and this stuff is just really exciting, which is why I started reading the Puranas, by the way. Not for the history, but to find out, what they thought about these things. And what they say is that in the Golden Age, thousands of years ago, we were completed beings, and we've deteriorated down through the ages, and now here we are, in the Kali Yuga, in the Iron Age. The Iron Age also means Aryan Age, by the way. And they're evacuating, they're going into Mars, everyone's getting out of Dodge because they're afraid that the sun's going to explode. But you know what? The Puranas say that the sun doesn't do anything for 400 more years. So I'm thinking that we might have a great opportunity here, since they're all reacting in a reptilian fashion and leaving and freaking out and screaming and everything, and their managers are also reacting in a reptilian fashion by stealing everything, destroying the place, and thinking they're going to escape underground. They might all be wrong, and this might be like the biggest trick of all time, in that we can gain back our destiny in the interval that they're all freaking out by reacting in an asymmetrical manner and taking back everything and actually beating these guys.
Well, there is that aspect, which is why I asked you if you acknowledge the notion of taking over the planet, because one of the plans that the reptilians are involved in, obviously, with the abductions and the genetic engineering that they're doing, is to create a hybrid race that will be able to occupy. In other words, they can better occupy, take over those bodies, and thereby, when the time is right, basically take control of the planet and turn it into what is in essence a Death Star, as they call it. Now, with that in mind, though, I have a couple questions coming at me. The way this radio station works is that people are in a chat room, and they can ask questions, type in their questions, or they can send them to our technician, Hans, who then relays them to me on the Skype. So I can read the questions and run them by you as we go here, just so that, because our audience is out there and they are listening. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a couple of these questions, and in some ways you might have covered this ground already in a way, it seems to me, but one person is asking, how can the Aryans predict accurately when the next huge solar cycle will be? And apparently it's cyclical, and that's what you have talked about. But I think let's drill down a little more. In essence, I just heard you saying that you don't think it, or at least the Puranas are saying that it wasn't going to happen by their calculations for another 400 years. Is that something you stand by? Because I've also heard that you go along with Patrick Jarrell and people of that, and I guess Cliff High is now part of that sort of gang. Can you address that?
Sure. Yeah. In fact, I'm not used to having such a sophisticated audience, so you'll have to let me gasp here. But anyway, so let's just clear that whole thing up. The Puranas say that the Kali Yuga ends in 2442, okay? And that's exactly 666 years from 1776, which is the year the Illuminati was created and the United States was created. I posit to you that the United States was created solely as a mechanism to get out of Dodge. In other words, to create a technological society sophisticated enough to not help these guys, to be slave labor for these guys to build their big ships and to move many, many, many amounts of goods from the Earth to Mars. Okay? 60,000 years worth of food and lumber and steel. Okay, now here's what happened though, is that in the late 1890s, a French guy named Lafrenion, who was a Freemason, and the Freemasons are part of the manager group, he went to Maya, Mexico, and the first guy to discover the long count calendar. And he saw the date, he wasn't counting the year that Jesus was born, so his miscalculation was 2011. Okay, we now know that you have to count another year in there, so it's not 2011, it's 2012, but he was close enough for government work. Anyway, he went back and he told his Freemasonic buddies that the Mayans said that the fifth sun, remember I said there's 5 suns in this 60,000 year period, one every 12,000 years, the fifth sun would end in 2011. And this is in 1894 or so, and they completely freaked out. And they immediately created Zionism. In 1899, they created the first Zionist conference with Herzl. The kindergarten group met in 1901, which was Rhodes and Milner, and they began so what happened is that in 1776, they thought they had 666 years to go, so they started work. But in 1890, they found out that the Mayans, and Maya is a Sanskrit word, and the Puranas are Sanskrit, so there's a connection between the Mayans and the ancient people who wrote the Puranas. The Mayans were saying that it was going to go in 2011, and instead of taking a chance with the 2442 date, they decided that they'd get out of Dodge early just in case they were wrong. And the Puranas do say that there's a twilight period that happens about 450 years before the end, and that it's sort of just the dwindling down, the final dwindling down of the age takes about 450 years. So it could be argued that, I'm misinterpreting the Puranas and that they're really saying it's 2012, and that's the beginning of the twilight period in which a coronal mass ejection would certainly cause things to begin to dwindle down. And,
So I
hope that clears that up.
Yeah, well, okay, but what about the notion that, at the moment, what we're getting is a lot of information about the stargates. And I'm wondering if you're aware of the stargates, if you're aware of the portals, and that there is a war over the stargates here on this planet, and so on, because the stargates apparently are key to what in essence is the transformation of the planet and the evacuation, the positive evacuation of, in other words, through ascension, through personal ascension, possibly group ascension. And I don't know how you're feeling about that. But in essence, the stargates are the key. And I'm wondering if you have gotten and you're aware of the information about stargates.
Well, I'm not. I've heard from Hoagland and Wilcox and others about, the Stargate thing, but I think we have to understand something very important. You and I are both stargates, and the pineal gland is a stargate, and it allows you to pass in through any part of the universe that you want. You just have to know how to unfold your hyperdimensional body and slip it through into the eye of the Stargate. And so we are all Stargates. And so if somebody's manufacturing a Stargate, I'm saying, well, that's great, but it's redundant because we are already that. It would just be much easier for us to take up a spiritual discipline and learn how to use our own Stargates. And in other words, there's a link up between the planetary or interdimensional stargates and our pineal gland. And so that I would say that's accurate. However,
you still have to understand that there are physiological or hyperdimensional gates that even these beings, whether they be Anunnaki or other types of beings, have to honor. In other words, they're passageways in essence. Now, some are human, augmented by human